July 10th, 2025. Over 2,000 elite U.S. Special Forces, accompanied by advanced drones and heavily armored tanks, launched a decisive offensive against a vast network of human, drug, and arms trafficking, masterminded by two American brothers, Lucas and Jared Stone. In the aftermath, over 3,000 cartel fighters were either killed or apprehended, while more than 2,000 innocent people were freed from underground cells. These individuals were either marked for gruesome organ harvesting or destined for the horrors of the global sex trade. But how did the United States execute this mission with such precision that not a single life was lost? What dark secrets lie hidden deep within the jungle? And why did the Pentagon resort to tactics and weaponry typically reserved for full-scale wars? Let us delve into the answers. Deep in the treacherous terrain of the Darien Gap, a remote stretch of jungle that separates Panama and Colombia, stood a fortress unlike any other. It wasn't built with bricks and mortar, but with an impenetrable combination of firepower, fear, and human cruelty. The sprawling compound was a symbol of the unimaginable power wielded by the Stone brothers, whose criminal empire spanned across continents. Despite its remote location, the fortress served as the central hub of a network that trafficked in both life and death, conducting business from the shadows where few dared venture. The operation to dismantle this empire was no ordinary mission. It involved the coordination of cutting-edge technology, precision strikes, and the unwavering commitment of elite soldiers who were willing to risk everything. Intelligence gathered over months, possibly years, paved the way for this assault. What the world had assumed was an insurmountable fortress was ultimately brought to its knees without a single civilian or soldier casualty. It was as if the assault had been choreographed with military precision, each movement designed to minimize risk and maximize impact. However, questions remained. How had the Pentagon orchestrated such a flawless operation? What had compelled them to deploy forces with military-grade weaponry in what many considered a law enforcement operation? What they uncovered in the jungle would change the course of history, revealing secrets that had remained hidden for far too long. The Stone brothers' empire was only a small part of a much larger, more terrifying puzzle, one that reached beyond borders and touched on the darkest corners of human nature. In a remote part of the world, two brothers, born in America, forged an empire built on ruthless exploitation rather than noble causes. Lucas and Jared Stone, both former elite soldiers, became infamous for their unyielding grip on the region. They didn't rule with ideals or visions. They were warlords, not cartel leaders. Their private army, numbering over 3,000 men, was shaped to reflect the best military tactics the world had to offer, modeled directly after U.S. military doctrines. The recruits they trained were put through grueling drills, honing their skills like Marines, with specialized missions executed like U.S. Rangers. Armed to the teeth with heavy artillery, shoulder-fired missiles, armored vehicles, and even advanced anti-aircraft systems, their stronghold was a fortress deep within the jungle. Every inch of their base was covered by snipers and high-tech sensors, ensuring that no one could approach unnoticed. Their operations were as much about power as they were about control. What set them apart from other criminal syndicates was their cold and calculated approach to human trafficking. They didn't just run drugs across borders, they trafficked thousands of innocent people. From every corner of Central and South America, over 5,000 men, women, and children were sucked into their vast, invisible network. Among them were at least 126 confirmed U.S. citizens who disappeared without a trace. These victims were often sold into grueling labor conditions, forced to work in horrific conditions, while others were harvested for their organs, their lives snuffed out for profit. The Stones ran their operations with unrelenting efficiency, their empire built on a foundation of fear, violence, and exploitation, and their reach extended further than anyone dared to acknowledge. The most terrifying situations involved individuals marked for forced labor and exploitation in the infamous Golden Triangle, a region notorious for its deep-rooted system of human trafficking. Their stronghold stretched across vast areas of jungle, covering over 40 square miles of unexplored wilderness. It was known locally as La Sombra. The name reflected the eerie nature of the place, a shadow where anyone who entered would never return. Surveillance over the area was provided by sophisticated aerial drones, and the criminals' sea operations were supported by repurposed yachts, armed with heavy artillery for both coastal and offshore trafficking routes. Several international forces, including teams from the United States, had made multiple attempts to infiltrate La Sombra over the past several years. All had ended in failure. The dense, treacherous landscape filled with thick vegetation and unpredictable ravines rendered traditional military tactics useless. To make matters worse, the criminals had cleverly incorporated civilians into the design of their compounds, including schools, clinics, and homes, turning the area into a human shield against any assault. The world was well aware of the horrors happening there, but no country had taken action until now. Authorities had long been aware of the systematic exploitation, yet international intervention remained elusive. The Golden Triangle had remained an impenetrable stronghold, with its vast jungles serving as an almost perfect cover. It was a haven for the ruthless operations that preyed on the vulnerable. Families, children, and adults alike were stripped of their autonomy, all for the purpose of generating profit from their suffering. The labyrinthine paths of La Sombra made it impossible to locate or rescue those trapped within its confines. In addition to the complicated terrain, the region was heavily guarded, making any type of rescue mission incredibly risky. The high-tech drones that circled above only provided glimpses of what lay beneath, while the forces on the ground were left to face constant setbacks. Despite countless failed missions and global outcry, the traffickers remained entrenched, their operations thriving amidst the silence. The few survivors who managed to escape spoke of a chilling efficiency in the system, where the very infrastructure of the jungle served to trap anyone who dared to venture in. The population, largely unaware of the outside world, lived in a constant state of fear, conditioned to follow orders without question. With its fortified borders and labyrinth of hidden routes, La Sombra seemed impossible to infiltrate. The world had been paralyzed by the sheer scale of the operation. However, a new strategy was being planned. It was no longer about brute force or overwhelming numbers. This time, it was going to be different. With intelligence and precision, a specialized task force began to form, aiming to breach the heart of La Sombra and put an end to the trafficking network that had caused so much devastation. With the full backing of several nations and advanced technology at their disposal, the stakes had never been higher. The silence of La Sombra was about to be shattered. The situation shifted dramatically when President Trump was informed that 2 American children, aged 9 and 13, had been discovered in a detention cell intended for illegal medical procedures. At that instant, a threshold had been crossed. The U.S. would no longer regard El Silencio as merely a drug cartel hub, but as a zone of conflict. The question arose, how could they operate so brazenly? The world wanted answers. Before the inevitable onslaught of military force, there had been years of growing frustration. The United States had not simply ignored El Silencio, it had actively tried to address the problem. Between 2021 and 2024, no less than 6 secret missions were carried out by elite forces, including Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, and CIA operatives. Each operation ended with the same dismal outcome: failure, retreat, and American casualties. During Operation Black, soldiers were killed when their helicopters were struck by coordinated missile fire, likely from shoulder-fired systems smuggled in from Eastern Europe. These deadly weapons turned the tide against the U.S. forces, preventing them from achieving their objectives and forcing them to pull back every time. The constant cycle of missions, each ending in tragedy, only increased the resolve of the U.S. government. The discovery of the children, subjected to horrific plans, sparked a decisive change in strategy. The battle for El Silencio was no longer just a covert mission. It was now a full-scale war. A year later, a reconnaissance unit consisting of 12 soldiers disappeared without a trace, just 18 miles from their base camp. No remains were ever found. The dense jungle worked in favor of the enemy. With massive sinkholes, thick tree cover blocking communication satellites, and humidity that disrupted drone cameras, the Darien Gap proved to be an effective counter to America's technological edge. Despite using satellite data and infrared sensors, the soldiers found themselves wandering in a maze of mud and fog, relentlessly pursued by a militia well-versed in the jungle's ways. But it wasn't only the land that made them vulnerable, it was the civilian disguise. The insurgents had built entire fake communities, complete with schools, places of worship, and even weddings, all meant to hide their hidden weapons caches and bunkers. Soldiers were hesitant, unsure of the potential for civilian casualties. That hesitation became their downfall. Hidden traps, snipers posing as locals, and buildings rigged with explosives transformed the quiet surroundings into a deadly trap. The following year, another unit was sent on a similar mission, only to disappear without a single clue as to what had happened. Their last known location was just 18 miles away from their objective, and no trace of their team was ever found. The dense jungle proved to be an insurmountable challenge. With wide sinkholes, the thick canopy blocking all signals, and moisture that interrupted drone functionality, the Darien Gap stripped away the technological superiority that had been America's strength. Even with satellites overhead and advanced imaging tools, the soldiers struggled to navigate through thick mud and an oppressive mist, while being relentlessly pursued by a militia that knew the terrain far too well. However, it wasn't just the landscape that made the mission nearly impossible. It was the enemy's civilian camouflage. The insurgents had created entire mock towns, complete with schools, churches, and staged celebrations, all designed to mask hidden military installations. Soldiers were reluctant to strike, fearing they might harm innocent civilians. This hesitation ultimately cost them. Hidden explosives, snipers concealed as locals, and buildings rigged to blow turned the area into a deadly trap for the unwary. The following year, a team of 12 soldiers was sent on a reconnaissance mission just 18 miles from their base, and they vanished without a trace. No bodies were ever discovered. The jungle played a major role in the team's disappearance. The dense foliage, vast sinkholes, and thick canopy made satellite signals almost impossible to capture. On top of that, the stifling humidity interfered with drone technology. The Darien Gap quickly neutralized the technological advantages that American forces once relied on. Despite using the latest intelligence and heat-sensing technology, soldiers found themselves disoriented in an endless maze of mud, mist, and treacherous terrain, pursued by a skilled and well-armed militia. The terrain wasn't their only challenge, it was the elaborate civilian camouflage that the enemy had set up. Entire fake villages were constructed, featuring schools, places of worship, and even faux weddings, all to conceal military bunkers and weapons. Soldiers, fearing the loss of innocent lives, hesitated to take action. But that hesitation cost them dearly. Traps, hidden snipers, and buildings rigged with explosives turned the jungle into a death trap. In the subsequent year, another reconnaissance mission was carried out by a 12-man team, located just 18 miles from their headquarters. However, they too disappeared without a trace, their fate unknown. The dense jungle environment proved to be a formidable ally for the enemy forces. Massive sinkholes, a thick canopy blocking satellite communication, and humidity that jammed drone signals all contributed to the Darien Gap's ability to neutralize America's technological superiority. Despite having satellite intel and thermal sensors, the soldiers found themselves trapped in a disorienting landscape of thick mud and mist, while being stalked by a militia intimately familiar with the jungle's every twist and turn. But it wasn't only the challenging terrain that made the mission difficult, it was the civilian camouflage set up by the insurgents. They had created entire mock villages with schools, churches, and even staged weddings, all designed to hide their military bunkers and armories. Soldiers hesitated to act, fearing they might accidentally harm innocent civilians. But that hesitation proved to be fatal. Booby traps, snipers disguised as farmers, and buildings rigged with explosives turned the region into a deadly trap, leading to the tragic loss of the unit. In a devastating discovery during a 2023 military operation, U.S. forces uncovered a compound consumed by flames, revealing 82 lifeless bodies, including 17 children. The victims were believed to have been trafficked and used as pawns in a horrific network. The cartel had intentionally set the building ablaze to erase any trace of their operation, using the tactic of scorched earth to cover their crimes and punish those they deemed expendable. The evidence was undeniable, and Washington found itself in a corner, struggling to respond. Outrage spread quickly across the nation, with the public demanding swift action. The Pentagon declared El Silencio, the cartel-controlled region, as one of the most fortified and impenetrable non-state territories in the Western Hemisphere. Each failed attempt to penetrate it only increased the sense of urgency. The reality, however, was painfully clear. Traditional warfare tactics were ineffective against such an entrenched, merciless enemy. America had to rethink its strategy entirely. To dismantle this empire of brutality, the United States would need to evolve its approach to warfare. It was no longer enough to rely on boots on the ground. The fight had to be waged through cutting-edge technology, utilizing algorithms, satellites, and precision-targeted strikes. The old methods of war were outdated. A new kind of battle was required, one where every move was calculated and every asset was optimized. By July 10, 2025, patience had worn thin. The United States had reached its breaking point, and it was clear that the time for decisive action had arrived. Would the military be able to overcome the challenges of this new type of warfare? The stakes had never been higher. After a series of mysterious deaths, vanishings, and horrific bodies being smuggled out from the shadowy depths of the Amazon rainforest, the U.S. government decided to take drastic action. In a groundbreaking move, Washington launched a mission like no other in the region. Codenamed Operation Steel Justice, this wasn't merely a military strike, it was a full-scale campaign aimed at total obliteration. The operation was immense, involving 2,500 specialized soldiers pulled from elite branches including the U.S. Navy SEALs, Special Forces, and Airborne Rangers. They were supported by an arsenal of 35 Apache attack helicopters, 50 heavily armored assault vehicles, and 15 mobile artillery platforms. However, the true game-changer came from the skies. The operation's centerpiece was the latest model of the MQ-30 Phantom drone, a cutting-edge unmanned aircraft designed for reconnaissance and precision strikes. With the integration of advanced biometric AI, thermal imaging, and sophisticated motion tracking systems, it could pinpoint hostile targets with near-perfect accuracy, even under the dense forest canopy. Each drone was linked to the Vanguard network, an advanced satellite system capable of covering an area of 40 square miles every 9 seconds, tracking enemy movements, weapon stockpiles, and heat signatures in real time. The scale of the operation was truly remarkable, not just in terms of personnel and equipment, but in its technological advancements. A fleet of unmanned aerial vehicles scoured the dense jungle from above, sending back crucial data to ground commanders. With the ability to analyze and act on this intelligence in seconds, troops on the ground were always one step ahead, able to respond with surgical precision. The effectiveness of the mission was amplified by the constant surveillance provided by these drones, ensuring that no enemy could hide for long. By the end of the operation, the region had been transformed. The once impenetrable jungle now yielded up its secrets, the rebels scattered, and the threat neutralized. But the success of the mission was not solely due to military might. It was the unrelenting power of technology, intelligence, and coordination that turned Operation Steel Justice into an unprecedented triumph in modern warfare. This technology enabled strategists to create a detailed 3D model of an adversary's stronghold, down to individual rooms. At the same time, in the Caribbean, a fleet of 3 Arleigh-class destroyers launched Tomahawk Block 5 missiles, each carrying an armor-piercing warhead and integrated AI rerouting systems. These systems allowed the missiles to adjust their course automatically should civilians enter the danger zone. The missiles were programmed to neutralize essential defense systems, communication hubs, and power grids before the infantry could make their move. The operation was meticulously planned to minimize civilian harm, with an emphasis on precision. The combat area was split into 32 distinct battle sectors, each under constant surveillance by drones, satellites, and a command team that utilized augmented reality technology. Additionally, biometric data from potential hostages was streamed live to ensure that no one was left behind or overlooked. To further ensure safety and accuracy, the military's arsenal included Abrams tanks, outfitted with advanced active protection systems, and GPS-guided precision targeting. These technologies allowed the tanks to strike with pinpoint accuracy, avoiding unnecessary destruction to the surrounding structures while still achieving their objectives. This approach exemplified the shift toward a more controlled and ethical form of modern warfare. A high-ranking officer from the Pentagon once stated, "This isn't a blunt strike, it's a precision operation, steered by advanced technology and meticulous planning." Every detail was accounted for, every footstep, the impact radius of each explosion, and even the movement of potential civilians. For the first time, the battle against organized crime wasn't just fought with weapons, but with cutting-edge algorithms and military precision. This wasn't about mere technology, it was about upholding justice. Justice calculated in meters, seconds, and energy. After years of setbacks, the United States wasn't merely returning to the battlefield, it was returning with mathematical precision, fortified by steel, and with no intention of missing its mark. At exactly 0300 hours on July 10th, 2025, the calm night over the Darien Gap erupted in a spectacle of flames. 12 MQ-20 Avenger drones pierced the sky, moving with absolute stealth. In under 20 seconds, their payloads detonated with precision. The explosions shattered 4 crucial command hubs, crippling the cartel's communication lines. The coordinated strike didn't just disrupt operations, it created a ripple effect, paralyzing the network of criminal control in the region. The drones, operating in perfect synchronization, turned the battle into one of calculated efficiency. With each precise hit, the grip of the cartel began to loosen as their communications were severed and their leadership thrown into chaos. This wasn't just about warfare, it was about a meticulously engineered plan coming to fruition. As the dawn broke over the horizon, the results of the operation were clear. The enemy was disoriented, scrambling to regain control. The mission, executed with the sharpness of a surgeon's scalpel, had delivered a resounding blow. In a world where organized crime had once ruled with impunity, the forces of justice had struck back with unprecedented precision, and the balance of power had begun to shift. Moments later, 6 advanced strike missiles plunged from the sky, obliterating radar installations, arms caches, and heavily fortified watchtowers. These were once thought to be invulnerable. Within the dense foliage of the jungle, the once dominant empire began to crumble. From the southern flank, 3 battalions of elite U.S. Army Rangers moved in, cloaked by the smoke of drones and scrambled radar signals. Equipped with infrared goggles and noise-reducing tools, they bypassed outer defenses and infiltrated the heart of the enemy compound. Meanwhile, over 30 Abrams tanks surged through makeshift barricades of logs and sandbags, unleashing a barrage of high-velocity rounds that turned cartel fortifications into rubble. From the northern skies, U.S. Marine Raiders descended via 8 MH-60 Seahawk helicopters, landing just a few meters away from the prison. In a matter of minutes, they overwhelmed the enemy positions and liberated thousands of civilians, including over 40 American nationals, all on the brink of being trafficked into the horrifying underworld of organ trade and sex slavery across the region. The gang retaliated fiercely. Explosives, heavy machine gun emplacements, and traps littered the central square, transforming it into a war zone. However, the American forces were ready. Anti-tank missile units dismantled resistance block by block. Self-propelled artillery stationed along the perimeter fired with precision, obliterating enemy positions while sparing civilian structures. By dawn, it was over. The casualty count was immense. 3,037 cartel members were slain, including both Diego and Marco Silva. Their remains were found in a bombed-out operations center. 728 were taken prisoner, now facing charges for crimes against humanity. There were no American fatalities, nor any civilian casualties. The fortress of El Silencio, once an impenetrable bastion deep within the world's most inaccessible jungle, had been reduced to a smoldering ruin. The facility's towering walls, reinforced shelters, and hidden tunnels were all destroyed. Its reign of fear dismantled in less than 3 hours. From the operations center of the USS Victory, a single encrypted transmission was sent to the White House. Mission accomplished, all captives freed, resistance extinguished. The United States had just executed the most efficient large-scale anti-cartel operation ever recorded. In doing so, it not only liberated the hostages but also redefined the principles of modern military strategy. As the dust settled over the ruins of Ciudad Sombra, the statistics painted a picture of complete destruction. Over 3,000 cartel operatives eliminated, 700 detained, and 2,000 innocent lives rescued from torture and execution. What was once a citadel of fear had become a mass grave of oppression. Among the remains recovered were the mutilated bodies of Carlos and Ivan Turner, discovered deep within the crumbled leadership bunker. Forensic experts confirmed their identities through DNA analysis and dental records. The fall of their reign signified more than the collapse of an empire. It shattered a long-held illusion. The myth that geography, weaponry, and human shields could shield evil from retribution was obliterated. News of the mission spread rapidly, with images of rescued children clutching U.S. soldiers, destroyed bunkers, and seized weapon stockpiles dominating global news. For the first time, the victims of human trafficking were no longer faceless statistics. They were individuals with names, faces, and hope for a future. The Pentagon issued a sharp and decisive statement. There would be no safe haven for monsters, no place too far for justice to reach, no leniency for those who trade human lives. Criminal networks in Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia were thrown into chaos. Intelligence reports intercepted frantic communications of command centers going silent, valuable assets destroyed, and traffickers retreating into distant hideaways. The message from the United States was clear and received. Any group posing a threat to U.S. citizens or to humanity itself would be pursued. Not as criminals, but as insurgents. The operation was more than just a tactical victory. It marked a turning point. No civilian lives were lost and no soldiers were sacrificed. The mission showcased the perfect blend of overwhelming power and pinpoint accuracy driven by discipline, technology, and unwavering determination. For the global trafficking networks, the message had been sent loud and clear. You may seek refuge in the deepest jungles or construct underground fortresses, but cross that line and the might of the United States will hunt you down. When that happens, there will be no warning, no retreat, no survivors. The destruction of the El Silencio cartel symbolized much more than the collapse of a criminal empire. It was a bold declaration to all who operated in the shadows. For years, cartels, warlords, and transnational criminal organizations had thrived on one key assumption. Bureaucracies were sluggish, borders were inviolable, and even the most horrific deeds could be concealed in remote jungles, behind innocent faces, or under layers of corruption and fear. This belief was shattered in a single moment. The ruthless efficiency of the strike not only ended a criminal reign, but also proved that no place on Earth was beyond reach. The world's most dangerous syndicates had learned the hard truth. The days of hiding in plain sight were over. The message was as much about justice as it was about a new era of power. The operation was a statement to those who believed they could live outside the law, shielded by wealth, violence, and fear. No matter where they hid or how well they fortified themselves, the United States had the tools, the will, and the reach to bring them down. The old world of secret criminal networks is now gone. The United States did more than just eliminate a criminal organization. It uncovered a chilling reality. The international human trafficking trade has transformed into a highly organized, heavily armed system. It is no longer confined to dark alleyways or border crossings. It operates like a military operation. From this moment forward, so will the approach to dealing with it. The operation against the Rodriguez cartel signified the dawn of a new tactical era. Cartels are no longer seen as mere criminals, but as military threats. Law enforcement gives way to high-tech tools like drones, satellites, and heavily armored forces. Justice is now met with swift, precise action, not slow courtroom battles. This operation was not driven by the desire for revenge. It was fueled by the need for justice and healing. It was for those whose voices were silenced, for the innocent lives smuggled in the shadows, and for the families who never gave up hope. The world stands by, waiting to see what happens next. Will the U.S. take this method to other regions like Central Africa or Southeast Asia? Will it extend into the cyber domain? Or was this merely a one-off message to those lurking in the shadows? Only time will tell. A singular fact stands uncontested. Those who exploit human lives will inevitably face justice. America, relentless in its pursuit, will track down every criminal, and once found, there will be no second chances. If you feel the urgency of stories like this, unvarnished, genuine, and unapologetically raw, be sure to like, share, and subscribe.